There is one major threat looming on the horizon. What is going on? Should we be concerned? We cannot uplift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty if we are not also developing indigenous technology. Shouldn't that worry all of us? UPI has been innovated in the country. The real beneficiary of this technology is also two large foreign conglomerates. How many Nobel Prize do we win each year? Well, answer is none. Any fundamental technological breakthrough always starts with science. Why is building a deep culture of science in India such a wicked problem? What will it take to solve it? What does the world really need from us? What do we own and control that world cannot live without? What is our bargaining power? There was really no difference between India and China when it comes. Hello, I am Mukesh Bansal, founder of Mintra and CureFit. Today I want to talk about something very important, the state of the deep tech ecosystem in India. Suddenly, everyone is paying attention to deep tech. Prime Minister has been talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat in many of his speeches recently. AI is reshaping economies around the world. The amount of investment in AI is just skyrocketing. AI and other deep tech technologies are also increasingly seen as almost like strategic weapons. There's a big question mark about strategic autonomy. We are all also wondering what is happening to the deep tech startup ecosystem in India. Lot of startup founders in India are relocating to Silicon Valley. Many of the Indian VCs who were very active in investment in India are now setting shop in Silicon Valley and almost preferring to invest in the Silicon Valley startup compared to Indian startup. What is going on? Should we be concerned? What is the honest take of our deep tech ecosystem? In today's episode, as well as next few, I want to really take stock of things, share my perspective on where we are on deep tech, what's possibly working, what's not working, what can we do. One of the key arguments I want to make is deep tech is more of an outcome. We are paying attention to it when it's starting to become a challenge for the country. But deep tech is rooted in deep sciences. The only way to have a thriving deep tech ecosystem is to first have thriving deep science and research ecosystem. I'll share my perspective on why I think that's the case. But first, let's look at where are we as a country. By most accounts, we have done very well. Starting from 1991 crisis, our economy has grown almost 6-7% every year for last 35 years. That is no small feat. There are very few places in the world which are able to have such sustained economic growth over 35 years despite change in governments, despite so many major global crises that world has seen over this period. So that's something great. That has resulted into our economy rising from $250 billion to over $4 trillion. We almost take it for granted that we'll keep growing at 7%. That has brought out almost 400 million people out of poverty. Today, there is a sense of optimism. We feel pretty good about where the country is headed. Our Prime Minister has very clearly established this vision of Viksit Bharat. Today, everyone is starting to believe in that vision and waiting for 2047, where we can truly say that from being a really poor country in 70s, 80s, we have shed that behind us, and today by 2047 hopefully we are going to be at par with most developed countries in the world, where we are able to afford very high quality education, high quality health, job opportunities for everyone, equality, and most importantly an environment where innovation is thriving in the country and resulting in fundamental breakthroughs, new type of products and services, which is powering the economic engine for 1.7, 1.8 billion people by that time. That's the size of country we will be, which will be largest by a long shot. So everything should look rosy, right? Well, let's pause and reconsider. While everything I've mentioned so far, there is a lot of reason for us to feel optimistic and take credit for where credit is due. But there is one major threat looming on the horizon. Today, the world we live in, The economic engine is very heavily driven by technology. In fact, that has been a story for the global growth over last 100 years. World as a whole has done very well. The living standards around the world are so much dramatically better compared to what they were 100 years ago. Today, everyone has access to internet, electricity, all kind of amenities at home, world-class health, and so on. These things were not even imaginable 100 years ago. And what has powered all of that is lot of scientific breakthroughs, which has had almost uninterrupted run over last 200 years or so. Unfortunately, most of those technology innovations happen outside India. We have been beneficiary of that directly or indirectly. While India has been a huge beneficiary of technological innovation, if we are really candid, we will acknowledge that most of technology has not been invented in India. The internet that all of us take for granted, the mobile phones, which are now in every part of the country and make everyday life so much easier, the satellites that we use for communication, for GPS, most of these breakthroughs and the products and services are based on technology and the fundamental science that was invented outside India. The world has become a lot flatter over last 75 years since World War II, which has enabled free flow of people, ideas, technologies, and free trade. And most of the world, including India, has benefited as a process. But the geopolitical winds are changing now. World is starting to become more polarized again. The dominant political narrative around the world seems to be, how do I make my country great again, even if it's at the expense of other countries. What has also happened is the world has mostly transitioned into a very strongly technology driven economy. Most of the productivity growth, economic development is deeply rooted in the caliber of technology. If you look at last 25, 30 years, internet, mobile phones, social media, free, easy communication tools have had a disproportionate share into how world economic growth has improved. And now with the advent of AI, we are on the one hand, we are looking at massive acceleration in the possible economic output of the world, but we also need to worry about who controls this technology. We have seen this year that it's very easy for countries to put up trade barrier and say this technology is going to be not available outside my country, or going to be only available to my friends, or only going to be available under certain conditions. For example, it's very easy for US to say that unless unless India stops importing Russian oil, we will not give you access to GPUs. If we don't get access to GPUs, which is very hard to come by today, how do we continue research in AI, develop products and services which are based on AI without that access? And if this can be cut off so easily, we face major existential challenges. Today, if we are not able to navigate the geopolitical environment and can have our access to technology easily cut out, it can have a major adverse impact on the economic development. Let's take example of H1B visas. Now, H1B, in my opinion, has done a great service to both India as well as US over last 40, 50 years. We have had millions of people who have gone from India to US on H1B visas. A lot of these folks, including myself, I was a beneficiary of H1B visa. I worked in US on H1B for almost 7 years. And as a result, I was able to absorb the ethos of Silicon Valley, and that learning, that network was very useful to me in the startups that I've been part of, and so on for hundreds of thousands of people. But just a couple of days ago, on a whim, H1B visa has been for all practical purposes has been blocked with a $100,000 annual fee. Most companies will not be able to afford that, and it will stop having economic sense. That's one example of a trade barrier which can be erected overnight. Today, we have most of the AI in the country is powered by the likes of ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, Meta's Llama, and even some of the Chinese model like Alibaba's Qwen and DeepSeek. Now we have a lot of startups, including what we are doing at Meraki Labs, where we are developing apps on top of these models. What if the access to these models were to be blocked tomorrow, or we are charged disproportionate price on the inference cost from these engines? Just like H1B, those restrictions can bring down our nascent AI ecosystem to a halt overnight. AI is going to be increasingly important for defense. Unless we have a say and control on the AI we are using, the defense ecosystem, it'll be very much vulnerable to foreign interference, and so on. If we zoom out and take stock of where are we with respect to our technology reliance, we'll realize that a lot of technology that we take for granted, which powers everyday business effort in the country, is of foreign origin, is foreign controlled, and it can be easily made less accessible or more expensive, wreaking devastating impact on the economic engine for the country. We take Google for granted. Over 95% of search that happens in the country are on Google, which means not only we are so heavily dependent on Google, every search generates very precious data that goes to Google and makes Google search engines, various other products that much better. One of the bright spot has been the rise of UPI in India stack. But if you look at closely, nearly 85% of all UPI payments are handled by PhonePe and Google Pay. While it's great from accessibility point of view, and it's great that you can pay for your 25 rupee chai in the corner chai store using UPI, but who controls these technologies? PhonePe is owned by Walmart, and of course Google Pay is Google. So while UPI has been innovated in the country, the real beneficiary of this technology is also two large foreign conglomerates. They are, today trillions of dollars worth of transactions happen on these platforms. Every time I use UPI to pay for my coffee or to take a loan on EMI, I'm also generating data which is going to database of these platforms, which is going to help them develop very, very deep insight about what is happening in the country, what are consumer preferences, what are they thinking, what are they worried about, where they are willing to spend, where they are reducing their spend, what the trends are. And all this is immensely valuable data, which not only makes their product better, but is already powering the AI these companies are developing. And while we are huge source of data for training these technologies, we don't own them directly. It has been said that India is becoming token factory for the world. What does that mean? If you look at the rise of LLM, they are mostly powered by what is known as scaling laws. What is scaling law? Scaling law means that the more data you fed to these large language models, the better they get, and they demonstrate a lot of emerging behavior. The total internet is about 15 trillion tokens of data. That data has been exhausted a while back. So how do you make these models a lot better? Well, you need more data to make them better. And one of the biggest source of data for these companies in India, for last many years, they've been hiring people in tens of thousands, paying them something like $2-3 an hour to do things like verify physics and math questions, or read out loud history lessons, verify the answers on medical questions that the LLM will generate, and that what is known as reinforcement learning with human feedback has been a critical ingredient for making these models smarter and better. So while India has emerged a huge source of generating these intelligent tokens of these models, we have absolutely no say in how these technologies are evolving. We obviously do not benefit from the economic surplus these technology will generate in future, but we have been mined dry, similar to how, I think the situation for me seems very similar to, if you go back to 200 years ago, the Britishers forced us that all the cotton that is grown in India needs to be shipped out raw to Manchester, where it is going to be processed, and the clothes were manufactured in Manchester and then shipped back to us at more than 10 times the cost. We may not realize it, but it's far worse with AI. We are generating these tokens nearly for free for these LLM companies, and then we have no choice but to use this language models, because this is a source of infinitely scalable intelligence that can make any product or service better. But every time we use these engines, we have to pay them inference cost, which is hundreds or thousands times more than the cost of token that these companies are spending in India or elsewhere. We have another threat which is looming large for the country, which is what happens to IT services companies. There have been many things which have developed in last 6 to 12 months, which puts a big question mark on the future of IT services. First, again, let's acknowledge that IT services have played a huge role in rise of the country. It is by far our biggest technology export. IT services generate nearly $300 billion of exports every year. The work done by IT services companies power nearly all of Fortune 500 companies. Most of the mission critical systems that these companies run on are developed by Indian IT services companies such as TCS, Infosys, HCL, Wipro, Cognizant, and many, many others. But few things should give us a reasonable cause for concern. First and foremost, AI is getting really, really good at writing code. If you have played with vibe coding platforms such as Cursor or Cloud Code, you will realize that these platforms are getting so much better in writing code. Last couple of months, I've been getting used to these platforms, including things like Lovable and Replit, and I'm amazed that I have not done any programming for last 20 years, but now I'm able to make fully functional early prototype app in matter of hours. This is fully functional code which these platforms can debug, they can test, they can write test cases, and so on. And most developers report they're already seeing something like 30-40% productivity growth. It's a matter of time before that productivity growth ends up being 80-90%. If you listen to some of the foremost technology leaders around the world, they are very confident that within few years this system will be able to write production grade code pretty much at the speed of thought. So what does that mean for huge army of people that IT services employ today? How much of that code may get automated? And if it does, it may not be exported to India. That's one. Second, with the recent change in the H1B regulation, it will be very difficult for Indian IT services companies to send a lot of people for on-site work. That has been very critical to establish on-ground channel, develop trust with customers, understand their processes, understand the requirements, and then back channel with the larger teams in India. So that is going to be a second big challenge for IT services companies. There's also a talk recently with the proposal of Hire Act, halting International Relocation of Employment Act, which may impose up to 25% additional tax. So the whole point is, while we have done a great job of developing a whole new industry, which has played a huge role in economic development of the country, but mostly that was about exporting well-trained labor for developing software for the world. It has done its job, but is also under tremendous threat. Unless we realize that this threat is here and real, and we are willing to take some major bold steps where the ambition should be, how can we start developing this technology in-house? How can we not so dependent on a technology that's developed outside, so that we have original IP which is protected, where people really need their IP from us. If we pause and really ask the question, what does the world really need from us? What do we own and control that world cannot live without? It's obviously not oil. We are not endowed with a lot of oil reserves or other sources of energy. We don't own a lot of original technology. For example, Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company owns. A lot of world is dependent on them to produce their semiconductors. World is heavily dependent on China for a lot of rare earth elements, a lot of critical technology which goes into EVs, precision manufacturing. World was dependent on India as a source of cheaper labor. We have had a huge labor arbitrage. India can do software development work at $10,000 a year, which will cost $100,000 a year in the West. Same for the BPO industry, where you can hire a call center employee at something like $5,000 a year, which is going to cost you $40,000-$50,000 in the West. And as a result, a lot of this work was coming to India. But as that arbitrage goes away and a lot of this work is done by AI-powered systems, what is the world going to be dependent on us? It is still true that our biggest asset is our young population and talent, but unless we figured out a system to translate all that talent, all that youth that we have into differentiated technology and products, world will not need us, and we can be easily arm twisted into making concessions, into giving up what the world needs. Now, one of the things world need is access to Indian market. We are nearly 1.5 billion people now. We consume a lot of things, and many companies around the world realize that access to this market can be very lucrative, and that is at the heart of the tariff wars. The reason we are stuck and not able to move ahead is US wants access to this market for a lot of their companies, including companies who produce processed foods and so on. And the India is not able to make those concessions, because if we do, it is going to have very adverse impact on employment here, on the income of a lot of farmers, which huge number of them who survive on very low incomes. So we really cannot open up our markets. So now the question comes that the only thing world needs from us is access to our market, what is our bargaining power? What is the leverage that we can offer? I very firmly believe that leverage has to come from the innovation that is powered in India. That innovation can drive two things. One is true self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat, which means that majority of what we consume is produced in India. To be able to produce all of that in India, we need to have very, very robust deep tech ecosystem, ability to do precise manufacturing, ability to do semiconductors here, ability to develop our own artificial intelligence systems here, and that requires very different ecosystem thinking. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal recently raised a lot of eyebrows when he said, should we aspire to be delivery boys and girls? Are we content just running shops? Now, at the first brush, a lot of people were offended. There is a sense that, people believe that we have done a lot of innovation, and I think rightly so. Last 20 years, if you look at the rise of e-commerce in India, rise of ride-hailing, food delivery service, these companies are obviously innovated in terms of bringing a lot of technology to the country, doing a lot of operations efficiency, a lot of first principles problem solving, and of course create a lot of employment in the process. All that is needed. We obviously need to have a lot of operations efficiency and a lot of operations driven business in India, but that's just one part of the story. If we also ask the question, what are the areas where we have genuinely created world class technology? Answer very few and far in between. So while it's painful to hear, I think there's a lot of truth to what Minister Goel is saying, and it's something that all of us need to pay attention to. Prime Minister has been increasingly very vocal about it. This year, he made it very clear that India has to aspire to be self-reliant in science and innovation. I think that's a great message. That's something that should be repeated again and again. He also admitted that we missed the semiconductor revolution 50 years ago. The government has been starting various missions which are starting to make their impact. Semiconductor mission has acquired a lot of steam over last decade, where we are finally seeing development of many of the fabs in India. Now we are seeing there's significant amount of investment in billions of dollars is going into setting up the initial fab, which will get the ecosystem rolling. We have seen something similar happening with the National Quantum Mission, National AI Mission. Now these are all early efforts. They haven't had any big success so far, but at least it's clear that the government is recognizing that how critical it is for the country. One of the biggest moves that I am personally very excited about is the setting up the RDI fund, Research, Development and Innovation Fund. It is $12 billion fund. That's pretty sizable. So $12 billion investment in India, along with some private investment which might come in, can be equivalent to $100 billion investment. It will definitely make its mark count. And it's not only limited to the deep tech funds and startups, but also paired with the second fund, ANRF, Anushandhan National Research Foundation, and that's another 50,000 crores. So about $6 billion, which is earmarked for investment in early research and technological development, which can eventually power the deep tech ecosystem. So RDI fund and ANRF together can have a huge impact. Today, whole world is in awe of SpaceX, what Elon Musk has done with SpaceX, and it's one of the boldest technological and entrepreneurial leap in all of history. But we should also acknowledge SpaceX could not have happened unless they got many multi-billion dollar contracts from NASA over a decade. Where are these contracts for Indian deep tech startups? So along with things like RDI fund, ANRF fund, we also need to create this guaranteed government business which can enable that 5-year runway for the startups to find their feet, tinker with technology, get some revenues going, acquire some technology if they need to, and eventually land on their feet so they can aspire to be globally competitive. I think everyone will readily agree that technology is very important for the country. But let's pause and think, where does technology come from? In fact, I've been actively thinking about that in my current new role. I've been working in Miracle Labs for the last 3 years. Miracle Labs is set up to be a deep tech venture studio. We want to see how we can create original technology driven companies. To do that, one of the things I've been doing is reaching out to a lot of research institutes, both in India and outside, talking to a lot of scientists and trying to understand from their point of view. And the more I look into this world, I realize that behind all technology, there is really slow culture of science where most things starts as curiosity-driven science questions, where someone is very passionate about it. They think about that problem, they tinker with a lot of ideas. Most don't go anywhere. Eventually, something gets published as a research paper. Among all the research papers, there are few which are interesting, and someone tries to build a prototype out of that. Some of them end up being a breakthrough. Every year, just as an example, every year hundreds of thousands of papers are published. But in 2017, when one of the teams at Google published this transformer paper, who had no idea they are about to lit up a revolution in how AI is done, because it was a fundamental breakthrough which was not relevant at the time. In fact, Google did not realize how fundamental it was. But another company, OpenAI, which realized. But how did OpenAI start? In 2015, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and many other individuals put $100 million each to seed OpenAI. There was no profit motive. In fact, OpenAI was set up as a non-profit company. They just wanted to work on open-ended AI research, and which is what they did. No one really heard about OpenAI until 2022, which is 7 years after they started. What were they doing all the time? They were just having fun with the science of AI, looking at the latest development, trying to move the needle, trying to contribute to that. If we look at DeepMind, which has played such a critical role in development of AI, has similar story. DeepMind was started by a bunch of scientists in 2010. They were only motivated by one fact, which is how does intelligence work? We are all intelligent beings, and we have this neural network, inside our skulls, which is somehow able to do all these amazing feats. And DeepMind wanted to understand that, model that from first principles, which is what eventually led to things like AlphaGo, many breakthroughs, Nobel Prize eventually for Dennis Hassabis. But even that is little late in the game. The other Nobel Prize in AI this year were people like Jeff Hinton and John Hopfield. Now, Hopfield was tinkering with neural networks in 70s. That is good 50 years before the GPT movement, when AI got unleashed on the global map. He was only driven by curiosity of how intelligence work in human brain. Can we leverage some properties of how neural networks work to create computing algorithm? Similarly, Jeff Hinton, most of his life was a career researcher. He toiled away in academia for decades. The reason I mention these examples is that no matter which technology you look at maturity, it's almost like the tip of the iceberg. The technology which have a breakthrough impact on the world are the tip of the iceberg. But the whole iceberg is this slow, meandering, deep culture of science. Any country which is able to produce sustainable technological breakthrough has to have that scientific backbone. And that's where we need to go back and deeply look at, where are we in science? This message hit home for me when I was talking to David Gross. David Gross is physicist at KITP in Santa Barbara. He won the Physics Nobel Prize in 2004 for the fundamental work that he did in unraveling how atomic nucleus works. Recently had an opportunity to meet with him and talk to him about his views in India. I should mention that he is a huge supporter of science in India. He played a leading role in helping conceptualize ICTS, International Center for Theoretical Sciences, which is a TIFR offshoot here in Bangalore, which is doing some cutting edge work in theoretical physics. He come to ICTS often, help shape the research agenda, recruit people, and just be a huge evangelist for science in India. What he said that is great that India is aspiring for Make in India, but what comes before Make in India is first discover in India, then invent in India, and then make in India. I was recently speaking with Rana Adhikari. He is a scientist at Caltech. He has been deeply involved in LIGO project, Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, which has been at the forefront of some cutting edge science in last decade. In 2015, LIGO observed gravitational waves for the first time, further confirming some of the key aspects of Einstein's theory of general relativity. Rana has been huge proponent of science in India. He is deeply involved in helping establish the Indian arm of LIGO in Maharashtra. Now, this is an example where Indian government is leaning in and deeply supporting the science development. The government has committed nearly $200 million for development of LIGO in India, and LIGO holds the promise of really advancing not only the cutting edge science in India, but also enabling huge precision manufacturing ecosystem around that. Rana has been coming to India for a lot of collaboration for driving LIGO India project, and one of his observation was that he think, at least his opinion is there are a lot of people in India way more talented than him in raw intellect, but they just don't have the right opportunity. We need to have this world class science project like LIGO in India to be able to give our young scientists the opportunity, environment to collaborate, and to really work on absolutely cutting edge precision things to be able to hone their craft and eventually contribute to development of deep tech ecosystem. I had my own personal moment of inspiration recently. I got to visit Cambridge, and one of the professors there, David Tong, was kind enough to take me to Wren Library. Now, Wren Library is where Newton also used to hang out more than 300 years ago. His private book collection is still there, but more than Newton's book collection, what inspired me was being able to look at original papers of Ramanujan, who you may recall as the math genius in South India, who out of a blue started doing this cutting edge math. His story is immortalized in the book and the movie Man Who Knew Infinity. But anyhow, sitting down in Wren Library and being able to look at his original handwritten papers that he sent to Thomas Hardy was a reminder of the caliber of genius India is capable of producing. But we also need to create an environment where this genius can prosper. Why is building a deep culture of science in India such a wicked problem? What will it take to solve it? A while back, I talked to Guru Madhavan, who is author of this book, Wicked Problems. He talks about how certain problems are so complex and messy, they require system level thinking. I think the state of deep science in India is at that level. We need to go very, very deep, understand this from fundamentals and first principles. It requires thinking about the culture of science. Who is interested in going to science? Do our best students consider pursuing a career in science? Do we have a great environment to do for them to do their work? In 2019, Prime Minister Modi had the right instinct where he said that in addition to Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, we need to also add Jai Anusandhan. I think this phrase needs to be repeated enough. There was a time in 60s when Lal Bahadur Shastri coined Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan because that was the need of the hour. We needed to find our feet as a military unit so that we can fend off the foreign offenders. And we also needed to acknowledge that farmers are the backbone of Indian GDP. And therefore, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan made sense, still makes sense. But Jai Anusandhan is equally, if not more important. And we cannot repeat this phrase enough. But more importantly, we need to ask, what does it take to enable? How can India become a deep science nation, deep tech nation? I don't think we can just talk about it and voila, from tomorrow we start to have major technological breakthrough. But we have recent parallel. In 90s there was really no difference between India and China when it comes to scientific prowess. We are producing equal amount of patents. In fact, we were ahead of China in many areas of science. It will become clear as I talk about all the foundational work that has actually happened in India for in the 20th century. China was only leading in low cost manufacturing in 90s, but since then they've invested heavily in their science and research ecosystem, which 2 decades down the line starting to pay huge dividends. For us, we are obviously not starting from zero. If we pay enough attention and invest judiciously, we can start to see dividends start to happen in as few as 5 years, and we can really aspire to not only be Viksit Bharat, but a leading contributor to global science in 1 or 2 decades from now. So what can we learn from that? Many of you might have watched the movie Oppenheimer recently, which was a blockbuster hit. Great movie, worth watching twice or thrice. But leaving all the drama of building an atomic bomb aside, what the movie gets to the heart of that in early 40s, In some ways, the whole world, definitely the West, was facing an existential threat. The popular story, as was told in the movie, is that of there is the World War. Hitler is getting stronger, stronger. West needed to do something, so they brought their scientists together. They put them in a desert for a few years, and somehow, miraculously, they managed to build an atomic bomb, and the bomb delivered a decisive blow to the Axis powers and ended World War II. Yes, that's right to some extent, but there's very convenient narrative. The true story of atomic bomb actually happens over 50 years. The reason the scientists in 40s were able to figure out how to split the atom is because 50 years ago, people like Max Planck, people like Niels Bohr, people like Heisenberg and Schrodinger, they're really worrying about what is the fundamental structure of atom. They were not driven by finding technological breakthrough. These were career academics. They were pursuing what's known as curiosity driven science. They were very, very curious to know what is inside the atom. Einstein, when he was working as a patent clerk as his day job in his 20s, will take his afternoon, evening to just ponder about some of the deepest questions which were unknown at that time, which led to his discovery of special theory of relativity, which helped us understand there is a finite limit to speed of light, which gave us famous MC square formula. In his 30s, he obsessed about what is the nature of space-time, leading to general theory of relativity. He called it the happiest thought he ever had. The science of how atoms work, which is fundamentally quantum mechanics, was quite well known. When things get harder in the World War II and the US government look around, they had so many scientists who were so well versed. Other thing that helped US immensely is the exodus of Jewish scientists in 30s. Nazi Germany had so many terrible ideas, including labeling most of the known science as Jew science, and they systematically started discriminating and even attacking a lot of scientists of Jewish origin, dismissing them for a lot of posts, jailing them, and so on, which led to mass exodus. That coincided with the creation of IAS, Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, which became a safe haven for a lot of these scientists. So everybody from Einstein to von Neumann to Wigner and many other world famous scientists ended up in 30s. Now US prioritized creation of this safe haven research institute with no teaching duties, no students. It's just a place where world class scientists can come, think about the questions that they are interested in, and do their work. They did not know there's going to be war in 40s or there's going to be need for possibly creating atomic bomb. It is the same story with internet. Internet burst out of seams in 90s, and in the last 30 years, internet has completely reshaped the world. But internet was again not designed with a commercial motive. In 1973, when Windsurf and Bob Kahn developed TCP/IP, the protocol that computers used to communicate with each other, they wanted a simple way for various academic institutes to share their ideas, share information about scientific breakthroughs, and have high quality collaboration. This was full 20 years before World Wide Web. Even www was not started as a commercial enterprise. Tim Berners-Lee, who was working at CERN, realized that particle accelerators are generating humongous amount of data, and even with TCP/IP, it was very difficult to find the data easily, which were distributed across so many servers around the world. So he wanted a simple hyperlink interface, which is what led to creation of www, HTML, and the internet as we know was born. Today we take it for granted that we can pull out our Google Maps and we expect Google Maps to know exactly where we are, even if we are driving in a small town or remote part of the country, we expect Google to know precisely which road we are on. How does Google know that? Well, it requires GPS technology, which requires three simultaneous satellites to be beaming signals to us. And that alone is not enough because these satellites are up there in space, they're moving really fast, which means, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, their time is running faster, which means their clock is going to be off by few seconds every day. And that few seconds every day, when we compute in distance, will translate into error of few hundred meters every day. So if we are not applying Einstein's theory of relativity to correct calculation of the distances, we will not be able to navigate safely and very easily end up on a, forget about, different road, perhaps different city. So here you can see the connection over 100-year period. This pattern, we can have countless stories. The bottom line is, any fundamental technological breakthrough always starts with science. Science always starts with curiosity driven research. That requires an environment where people who have world class intellect, genuine love for science, genuine curiosity about wanting to understand things, get their environment where they have a runway. There is no pressure to produce something tomorrow. That's why in academia, they have a concept like tenure. Tenure give academician in some ways assurance that now your employment is guaranteed for life. You do what you love to do, try to come up with the original ideas, train next generation of scientists along with you, and that funnel eventually lead to technological breakthroughs, to startups. So we can pick up any example where you are truly wowed by the technology and trace back the steps slowly. You will inevitably end up in a research environment like that of Xerox PARC in Bay Area in 60s and 70s, or AT&T Bell Labs for nearly most of second half of last century, or lot of academic institute. That's where the seeds of scientific investigation, of curiosity driven research are sown, and that creates the environment that trains the talent, and eventually that leads to technical breakthrough, which seems magical by the time these technologies are in the hand of end consumers. So the obvious question from this is, what are the lessons for India? What can we do? There are areas in the recent past where we have come from nowhere and achieved global significance. We know about the rise of IT service industry, but in other walks of life as well. I remember growing up in 80s and 90s, we were a laggard team in cricket. Today, we are the by far the world's best cricket ecosystem thanks to IPL, lot of grassroots levels investment, and we are nearly unbeatable in cricket now across all formats of the game. Let's look at OGQ, Olympic Gold Quest. India was not winning any medals at all beyond hockey. Now we expect India to win 5 to 10 medals every Olympic Games, and OGQ, which is a small organization started by Geet Sethi, Prakash Padukone, and Vishnathan Anand, has done its part and really given India that hope and method to be able to aim for and compete for Olympic gold medals. Even more recently, we have seen that in chess, we had one world-class player in Vishnathan Anand until 5 years ago when he started set up WACA, the chess academy, along with Westbridge. And India already has 4 players out of top 10. That's incredible. That's really counting at a global level. But if we ask the same question for Nobel Prizes, let's ask a simple question. How many Nobel Prize do we win each year? Well, answer is none. When was the last time India won a Nobel Prize? Well, there have been couple of Nobel Prizes for people of Indian origin, Abhijit Banerjee and Venki Ramakrishnan, who was on this podcast, which is great. One was in economics and other in biological sciences, but there hasn't been any Nobel Prize in physics or chemistry, and none for an Indian citizen for 7-8 decades. Why is that? India is home to 16% of humanity. Shouldn't we aspire for at least 5% of Nobel Prizes? Now, on average, the Nobels in sciences, three Nobel Prizes are given every year in each area, up to three people. So let's say about 7, 8 in sciences every year. Over a decade, that's 80. Even if we aspire for 5% of Nobel Prizes, that translates to 4 or 5 every 10 years or 1 every 2, 3 years. We haven't had one in 7, 8 decades. Shouldn't that worry all of us? Now, first half of 20th century, we were not even an independent country at that time, but we produced many world-class scientists. C.V. Raman got the Nobel Prize. Subramaniam Chandrasekhar got the Nobel Prize for his work on black holes. S.N. Bose, whose work is perhaps even more pioneering, he missed out on Nobel Prize for a variety of things, but he did some pioneering collaboration with no other than Albert Einstein, and his name is immortalized in phenomena such as Bose-Einstein condensate, Bose-Einstein statistics, and more importantly, one of the fundamental particles known to us, bosons, which are all the force particles, are named after him. We had Abdus Salam, who was born in undivided India, who eventually did pioneering work in unifying electromagnetic force and weak force. We had Ramanujan, who is one of the biggest mathematician brains ever produced in the world. All this over the span of just few decades between 1910 to 1940. What happened since independence? We are a much larger economy. We've had 75 years of freedom. We have many world-class institutes, but why are we not producing Nobel Prize? And it's not about Nobel Prizes at all. What happens is every time there's a Nobel Prize, it draws attention to that area of science. It attracts a lot of younger people to want to pursue that area of research. It inspires a lot of younger people. When I was talking to David Gross, he mentioned that as a 13-year-old, someone gave him a copy of a book written by Einstein and signed by Einstein. And as a 13-year-old, he was hooked. He pretty much decided at that time that he is going to be a scientist and going to figure out the ultimate nature of reality, which he did. So Nobel Prizes, attracts funding, attracts talent, make science popular, and it's just one sign of a vibrant, thriving ecosystem that science is doing well, which is going to do its part in many other ways to set the backdrop for high caliber deep tech ecosystem. There are few stories for America which are very illustrative, and which is why from US government to academia to even private research institutes such as Xerox PARC and AT&T Bell Labs, and later on IBM Thomas Watson Research Center became places where some of the brightest in the America and from around the world will come to work on open-ended problems without any timelines, milestones. You have no idea where it will lead to, but give an environment to enough motivated, driven people, and eventually something comes out at the other end. There is no denying that second half of the 20th century belongs to America. America achieved a level of global hegemony, technological innovation, center of pioneering so many new development technologies for the world. China has arguably managed to do in 25 years what America did over 75 to 100 years. I should also acknowledge the role of private research labs, especially Bell Labs and Xerox PARC. There was a time where Bell Labs was known as Idea Factory. It seems that all the exciting cutting edge work in the world was happening in Bell Labs. Over a period of time, Bell Labs scientists have won 8 Nobel Prizes. Now that's unthinkable. India has not won 8 Nobel Prizes in science so far in last 125 years, while one organization, Bell Labs, did. It's only because of the talent they were able to attract and the environment they were able to create. And I can assure you, Bell Labs funding was nowhere close to, not even perhaps 1% of what India spent on science already. So it's always not about the funding. It's also about the environment, it's about the people. And many other US companies were able to replicate that. Xerox Spark played a huge role in ushering the personal computing and networking era. A lot of technology we now take for granted, from display screens to keyboard to mouse, were all invented inside Xerox Spark. Uh, IBM's Watson Research Center gave us Deep Blue, which defeated Gary Kasparov in '97 in a chess match, showing the early preview of what AI will be capable of doing, and many other such research institute. Today, places like Microsoft Research, Google, Amazon Research, Meta Research are powering cutting edge research in areas such as, obviously, as AI, semiconductor research, quantum computing, even biological research in deep mind. So US model has figured out a way where the industry also does heavy lifting of investment in research. In fact, in US, as much as 60% of all research funding is private, which is very different than what is in India. We'll talk about this in some more detail. We are seeing this whole industry government collaboration for fundamental research play out all over again in the AI age. The AI industry and government has never been closer than now. Uh, while the industry is figuring out many hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, US government is creating this protectionist environment around them, easing policy, making it easy for them to find data, secure data, create trade barriers for countries that might compete with them, while enabling access to what they need, for example, cheap data from India and other things. And which has a real potential of further strengthening US's hegemony on in world affairs, especially if they come to control the evolution of AI in the coming decades. So the lesson for India is very clear. We have the benefit of hindsight. We can look at and learn from all this ecosystem. We should study what China has done recently, because their context and environment is a lot closer to our environment. And knowing that, in 80s and 90s there was really no difference between China and India. If anything, we were perhaps a bit ahead, at least when it comes to the scientific backbone and the trained workforce in sciences. So if China can do it, so can India. Whether you are in government, whether you are in private industry, or an entrepreneur or a scientist, what are we doing? What are we doing to live up to the standard these people set up for us when they had almost nothing? But from nothing, they created world-class technology. They created a world-class institute. They made their mark on global scale, and they trained next generation of scientists. If we reflect on this history, we realize that we really have nothing lacking. Only thing lacking is the will, the ambition, and the nurturing ecosystem. If we are able to take inspiration from our ancient past, where we were making probably only place in the world which was investing in sciences to understand fundamental nature of reality, we can take inspiration for last 125 years, where we have built world-class institutes such as IISc, TIFR, or organizations such as BARC, ISRO, which are really second to none in what they do, and translate that inspiration with the economic might of the country. Today, we are a $4 trillion economy. We spend 0.7% of GDP into R&D, which is not ideal, but that is still $30 billion a year. This is not small amount of money. $30 billion in purchasing power parity is easily equal to $100 billion. Everyone agrees that we have no dearth of talent. How do we steer this entire ecosystem? If we don't do, we run the risk of coming this far but flattening out from here on. forever condemning hundreds of millions of people to lower middle class lifestyle, heavily dependent on foreign technology. On the other hand, we can take the bull by the horns. We can acknowledge, yes, we aspire to Nobel Prizes. We aspire to original IP. We aspire to create deep tech technology companies. And for that, we are going to nurture our science ecosystem. We are going to create an environment where it is cool to be aspire to be a scientist, where we celebrate scientific breakthroughs, where we create an environment where people can work on fundamental problems in both academia as well as privately funded research institute. If we can do that, our dreams, aspiration, and vision for Viksit Bharat starts to become that much more real. At SparX, I realized that one of the things we want to do is talk about topics that really matter for the country. I am convinced that deep tech and deep science is perhaps the most important topic we can talk about. This is to not uh, this is not about focusing on what's cool or what's interesting, but this is what is going to power the economic growth of the country. We cannot grow 7-8% every year if we are not making technological breakthroughs. We cannot uplift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty if we are not also developing indigenous technology which creates employment here, where the profit pool stays in the country. We cannot employ a lot of people with just assembly engineering of make in India. We need to do original manufacturing, which will generate huge amount of employment and of course competitive edge, which will give us products which are differentiated, which we can export around the world. Uh, so we will make sure at SparX we are having continuous conversation about deep tech and science. I'll share what I can, as well as we'll keep bringing a lot of experts who are thinking deeply about the deep tech ecosystem for them to share their thoughts. Let's talk about this in more detail in the next episode of SparX. Thank you. At SparX, we aim to bring to you stories of exponential impact. We share in-depth analysis of what goes behind success stories. If you find our conversations interesting, you can join us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to SparX on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or any other audio platform of your choice. If you have any suggestions on who we should invite or what topics we need to cover, just let us know in the comments. We are always listening, looking for ways to improve, and keep getting better as we go along.